There's a strange type of man that society doesn't quite know what to do with. He doesn't always move fast. He doesn't look like he's hustling day and night. Sometimes he looks lazy. And yet, beneath the surface, something is happening. At the end of this video, you'll understand why society fears the lazy, ambitious man, and what Carl Jung's ideas can teach us about this quiet paradox. Now, before we dive into Jung, let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how people react differently when someone says they're busy versus when someone says they're resting? If you tell your friends, "Man, I've been grinding all week, barely slept," they'll probably nod, respect you, maybe even envy you. But if you tell them, "I just spent the whole day lying around, not doing much," you can almost feel the air change. It's as if you've broken some invisible rule. Hold that thought. We'll circle back to it. Jung once said, "The man who promises everything is sure to fulfill nothing." Think about that. The person constantly busy, constantly chasing, constantly overpromising, in Jung's eyes, might actually be further from real achievement than the one who waits, who holds back, who allows things to form in the unconscious before acting. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Imagine the guy who's in college right now. He skips classes sometimes. He spends hours scrolling TikTok. He plays video games until 2 a.m. His parents shake their heads. His friends joke about how unmotivated he is. And yet, every now and then, he drops an idea so sharp, so well-timed, everyone's caught off guard. It's like he's been storing energy, silently observing, waiting for the right moment. Jung would say, that's the unconscious at work. That's the shadow collecting material, reorganizing it, letting it ripen. And this is where the fear begins. Because society runs on predictability. It loves the man who wakes up at 5 a.m., does his workout, posts his motivational quote, clocks in his hours, and follows the map step by step. You can see him coming from a mile away. You know where he's headed. There's no mystery. But the lazy, ambitious man, he's harder to read. He doesn't announce his every move. Sometimes he doesn't even look like he has a plan. And yet, when the moment arrives, he strikes and it feels effortless. Pause for a second. Have you noticed that in your own life? That the moments when you were lazy, when you felt like you were wasting time, later became the moments that gave birth to something unexpected, an idea, a solution, a turning point. Jung believed the unconscious mind does its work best when we step aside, when we aren't forcing every detail. That's why he warned against what he called inflation, the ego puffing itself up with too much control, too much forcing, too much of the "I must." Think about hustle culture today. Scroll through Instagram or LinkedIn and you'll see endless posts about grinding, waking up at dawn. There's almost a worship of exhaustion, but you rarely see someone celebrated for waiting, for being quiet, for lying low, letting things come together in their own time. And yet, Jung reminds us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. That pain? It isn't always physical. Sometimes it's the discomfort of not moving, of feeling behind, of being misunderstood. Hold that thought. Let's get practical for a second. Picture a workplace, 2 employees. One is always typing, always talking, always scheduling meetings. Everyone sees him working hard. The other? He leans back in his chair. He stares out the window. He takes long lunches. People whisper, he's so lazy. But then, when the crisis hits, when the project is about to collapse, it's that second guy who calmly points out the one overlooked detail that fixes everything. And suddenly, everyone remembers why he's still there. That's the lazy, ambitious man. Not lazy because he lacks vision. Lazy because he refuses to waste energy on appearances. Jung would call this contact with the shadow, the part of us that doesn't play by society's rules but still carries wisdom. Society fears him because he's proof that their constant busyness might not mean much. Now, let me ask you this. Why do you think people get so angry when someone succeeds without showing the grind? Why do online comments flood in with, "Oh, he just got lucky," or "she didn't earn it"? Because it challenges the story people live by. That effort must always look visible, sweaty, obvious. But not just that. Jung's psychology reminds us that ambition doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sleeps until the exact right time. Ever seen bamboo grow? For years, it looks like nothing is happening, just tiny sprouts. Then, one season, it shoots up meters in weeks. That's the lazy, ambitious man. Quiet. Until he isn't. And that's exactly why he's feared. Because how do you compete with someone you can't measure? Someone whose timing you can't predict? Someone who doesn't burn out showing you his every step, but waits, and then leaps? Jung said, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." What looks like laziness on the outside may, in truth, be an inner order taking shape. Now, I know what some might be thinking. Isn't this just making excuses for procrastination? Fair question. But here's the difference. True procrastination is avoiding forever. Lazy ambition is waiting, preparing, gestating. It's the man who might look inactive, but inside, ideas are aligning. Energy is charging. The bow is being drawn back, slowly, patiently, until the arrow finally flies. Ever noticed how some of history's greatest minds were called lazy in their time? Einstein staring off into space, lost in daydreams. Newton sitting under a tree when the apple fell. People mocked them, but they weren't idle. They were thinking differently. Carl Jung himself spent years in a period he described as his confrontation with the unconscious, where he drew, wrote fantasies, let his imagination run. To outsiders, it probably looked strange, unproductive. But out of that came the foundation of modern depth psychology. So here's the uncomfortable truth. The lazy, ambitious man frightens society because he doesn't play by its stopwatch. He doesn't validate their obsession with being busy. He lives on his own rhythm. Now ask yourself, why would society fear that type of man? Because if more people followed that path, the entire structure of look busy, work harder, prove yourself would collapse, and those in power rely on that structure. But hold on a minute, because there's something deeper. Society also fears him because he mirrors their own shadow. Jung taught that what we reject in ourselves, we project onto others. So when people see a man who rests yet still rises, who waits yet still wins, they're forced to confront the uncomfortable possibility. Maybe their endless grinding isn't the only way. Maybe their sacrifices, their sleepless nights, weren't as necessary as they thought, and that hurts. Let's tie it back to daily life. Ever had a friend who seemed to always stumble into opportunities? He wasn't the loudest, wasn't the hardest worker in your group, yet things seemed to click for him. Didn't that frustrate you, even just a little? That's projection. That's society's fear in miniature. But here's the closing loop. The lazy, ambitious man isn't trying to prove anything. He isn't rebelling for the sake of rebellion. He simply trusts the deeper current. Jung reminds us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The lazy, ambitious man lives closer to that unconscious current. He lets it shape him, and when the time comes, he moves. So, the next time you see someone lying back, seemingly doing nothing, ask yourself, are they wasting time? Or are they simply listening to a rhythm that society has forgotten how to hear? At the end of the day, society fears the lazy, ambitious man because he shows that power doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it waits, And when it finally moves, the world can't stop it.